You know I'm right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese and Joe. Do you want real? This is a powerful, dedicated experience, legitimate and responsible reality grounded in fact with no hint of fake news from a commentator who has dealt with his fair of it. Joe, tell everybody who our guest is today.
This is a big one, and this is somebody who anybody who's watched ESPN over the course of the last 20 years will recognize this person. He currently hosts his own podcast, which is Unmuted. He was a longtime featured panelist on ESPN's Around the Horn, former longtime columnist in Chicago. He's been around the place a little bit, but some might say he's controversial. We'll say he's outspoken. This is a really, really great get, Nick. You did great. Mr. Jay Mariotti. Jay, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show, and how are you doing today?
I know you guys are right, but I think I'm right also. So we'll find out who is more correct than the other.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Thanks
Jay,
for having me, by the way.
No problem. Want to kick it off. I wanted to know, when you used to travel, was it a requirement that you stayed at a Marriott, or were you going around?
Because sports writer points are legitimate. I don't know if they are anymore. Nobody's traveling. I don't know if anybody will travel again. What's the point? You can watch on TV. That's what everybody's doing now. But yes, you'd stay at a Marriott, and sometimes they wouldn't notice I had an I on the end of my name. So I'd get a suite every time, especially in Cleveland. I don't know why Cleveland, but always a suite.
So you were getting the Paris Hilton treatment every Marriott you went to.
Yeah, well, I'd be careful there. I wasn't getting Paris Hilton treatments. Brian Urlacher was. Nobody knows that. Why am I talking Brian Urlacher today? Because his brother was pardoned by Trump. His brother was caught in a gambling fiasco. He's a mayor of a Chicago suburb, Casey Urlacher. I don't know why I'm going here right now, but it's on my mind. If Lil Wayne was pardoned by Trump, why not Brian Urlacher's brother, even though he was involved in a big gambling scandal?
Interesting. Well, now, you mentioned gambling. What are your thoughts on now that sports gambling's taken over television or radio? All you see is sports ads for gambling.
It's a parallel universe, and I'm very disturbed by it, because anybody who is a purist, I think you guys are, you enjoy sports for what they are. If it's a blowout a half an hour ago, I don't really care what's going on in the final minute and a half, but I guarantee a buddy of mine does. And to me, that's another world. It's not the world I'm attached to. I, to this day, love sports, even though right now it's very difficult to get into it legitimately with everything going on in the world. But I'm disturbed that the sports industry, including the leagues, who right now need money, are diving headfirst into all of this without recognizing the possible ills, the possible scandals, not possible, the certain scandals that will result from this. But right now, Adam Silver, who's as good a commissioner as I've seen in sports in a long time, he's lost his mind in regard to gambling. Goodell, who just a couple of years ago was frightened to go to Vegas, now has a spaceship in Las Vegas and now is heading hellbound into Vegas for a Super Bowl. So I've almost given up this fight, guys, but till the day I die, I am going to watch sports, for the legitimate competition, and not for the prop bets and the over-under and all the nonsense that Al Michaels seems to keep bringing up.
How long is it going to be until we see, rather than, a Lakers logo, we see BetMGM on the jerseys in the NBA?
Tomorrow? In-N-Out Burger. It'll happen. It's happening in the Premier League in England, and it's going to happen here. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. And you know what, guys? There aren't enough people in the media who are resisting this, because too many people in the media are scared for their jobs. And you're seeing a lot of people I know have moved over to gambling sites. My old boss in Chicago, as good a boss as I've ever had, Bill 80, is now working for what's it called, VSIN, Vegas Sports or Stats and Information Network. He's running the joint. That's not the Bill I remember. I mean, God love him. He needs to make a living, but I couldn't even think about doing that. I wouldn't know the first thing about telling somebody how to bet a game. I'll tell you about Tom Brady this weekend and what a great story it is, but I'm not going to get into over-unders, and I'm not so sure that a lot of these sports writers who are moving over to that side really know either. I did see Brian Musburger, who has money behind that same operation, Brent's nephew, I guess, say that he thinks sports writers can be of great value to gambling sites because of the inside information they have. So what? We're now going to be eavesdropping in locker rooms if we ever get back to them, so we can tweet something out about, hey, I heard about this guy's ankle problem. That's not my purpose. That's sleazy. So yeah, I'm a watchdog. I just don't think enough people in the industry are watchdogs because they're scared for their careers and they might have to go work for places such as this. So I feel like the Lone Ranger on this subject.
So Jay, I want to piggyback off Nick's point because he mentioned the logo on the jerseys. Now, due to the pandemic, the leagues are hurting. So I want to get your official opinion on the broader scope of this, meaning other different types of advertisements on jerseys. The National Hockey League came back. They had to realign the four divisions geographically, and now we have sponsored divisions. Now, obviously, that's more revenue for the league, coming off of everything that's happening right now in the world. So, for me personally, the ads, I don't necessarily mind it so long as it's in a location that doesn't overshadow anything regarding the leagues or the teams or the players. I want to get your opinion on this because obviously this is probably a change that's going to be across the board, probably within the next couple of years. I would say within the next 5 years. So what is your opinion on that? Do you think it is here to stay? Are you okay with that?
Once they implement something, it doesn't go back to the way it was. It's here to stay. They sneak it in there when nobody's watching, and that's it. No, I don't like it. It interferes with my enjoyment of the game. The classic Dodgers logo. What? We're going to have something splotched up here now? That's going to interfere with that. The Celtics, the Yankees, anything gets in the way of tradition. That's what sports has to hang on to. We're going through these traumatic changes in sports. If you don't have tradition, what do you have? So we're going to splotch up uniforms now? They don't need the money. All right, so they're not making as much money as they were. You're in a blip in time, hopefully. It's only, we're only going to have a few more months of this, who knows? But come on, guys. I mean, I'm seeing Adam Silver, I'm a little off track here, yesterday speak at a virtual conference and actually say, we are going to hopefully get LeBron and Steph Curry and other African-American athletes to speak out about being vaccinated. In return, they'll be vaccinated. Wait a minute. They don't need to be vaccinated to do PSAs telling people the advantages, the benefits of being vaccinated. That's Adam Silver saying, whoa, we've got outbreaks over this league. We might not get through the season. So we're going to jump to the front of the line and, we'll have our greatest stars do PSAs. Adam, they can do PSAs without the vaccines. So I'm watching sports real closely. If you read my column, I'm probably the only guy doing this because ESPN, Fox, all the other sites, The Athletic, they're not going to allow somebody to take on the people who enable them. You're not going to see somebody going after Adam Silver there. I'm not patting myself in the back. I'm just saying that's one of the beauties of working for an independent site or doing what you guys are doing. Once you go corporate, and I've worked for many corporate entities, suddenly they're telling you in your earpiece, shut up or don't go there or whatever. Well, I don't hear anybody in my earpiece right now saying anything. And that's why it's so
no mute button
refreshing
here,
to talk
Jay.
to you guys.
No mute
Tony
button
reality, none of that nonsense. And I will say this, as long as I'm here, when I was on the show, we were near 1 million a day. They're down to about 250,000 a day. Maybe they need to let people speak out a little more on those shows because they're getting kind of boring.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that, but it really hasn't been the same since we had a consistent, usually it would be you and Woody Page on at the same time. Since then, it just hasn't been the same, and they redid the set. They have these different type of analysts coming in and out every day, but at least with you, when you were there, it was consistency. You were pretty much on 5 days a week.
Well, we had a core of 6 to 7 people. For whatever reason, in recent years, I think Bristol started to undervalue the content of the show. They're making their money off that block of advertising with PTI and the other shows. I don't think Bristol really cares who's on the show. And I think that's one of the reasons they've lost 2/3 of their audience, at least since then, because you're right. They have brought in villages of people from everywhere. And what happens at ESPN is when they retain a certain personality in a contract, they will say, all right, you're going to do 20 around the horns, X number of around the horns a year. That's not the way it was with us. I was on 250 times a year. Now it's, Sarah Spain on 30 times a year, or somebody else on this, Pablo Torre. And I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying you've lost your continuity. And therefore, I don't know how many times I've heard people in my lifetime say, did you and Woody get along? No, that half hour we did not get along. But in real life, we were fine. That half hour, we hated each other because it was legitimate. That's why the producers were smart enough to put us on all the time, because from that conference call in the morning on, I'm all over his ass for not doing his homework. And then he's all over me for being jabroni or whatever I am. And it was legit. We're not making this up. Some of these shows, they are legitimately faking it.
Jay,
weren't.
I think
I was after him.
I think your point of like they don't care who's on the show is so evident now with Le Batard leaving, and they still have Highly Questionable, which is his show, and they're just still going on. But what are your thoughts about him leaving, and now he's going to try to start his own network with Skipper?
Hey, good luck. I just don't think in a pandemic you play that poker card like Jason Whitlock. What are you guys doing? I mean, you're not, no, but I don't care if you're the sports version of Howard Stern. Nobody's going to be spending big money on anybody in a pandemic. What's he thinking? Keep taking their money, bite your lip, and keep moving on until the right time. How many times have you guys heard? You're pretty young. Don't quit a job until you have another offer. Well, what's he doing? I know he's got probably a lot of money in the bank, but I think the longer he is on hiatus, the less relevant he becomes. And I'm sure his people will now be, pillaring me on social media. I don't care. I'm just telling the truth. And I'm sure right about now, 3 weeks in, he's probably realizing there's no Sirius XM offer here. There's no Spotify offer yet. Maybe there will be down the road. And I think that's going to put pressure on him, because the longer he's off the air and he comes at a big price, so do all of his other people on that show. There's more pressure. There's more sweating. There's more families who are wondering where the next paycheck's coming from. So if I'm Dan, and I knew Dan way back when, I don't think I make that move. I just keep taking the damn money.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do it, I think when you look back at prior people who have left companies who went elsewhere, I mean, they had mostly an ready-made scenario ready to go. Right. You look at Dan Patrick, went right to NBC, had that slot all ready to go. He's fine. You look at Colin Cowherd, had that spot with Fox all ready to go. He's fine. And I think to your point, you're 100% correct. If you're looking to move, and I think the move now more so than ever is to get away from those corporate, structures in a way. I think some people do better on their own. I totally agree with you 100%.
See, Dan had that TV component, and that meant everything. Right. He's not going to have the TV component anymore. You could be walking through an airport in the middle of the afternoon. There's Dan Le Batard. I don't know how many times in the 8 years I was on Around the Horn, somebody, I just saw you on the TV in the bar. How could you be on there? Just funny stuff like that. TV is gold. He's going to recognize that. He doesn't have that outlet anymore. Very talented guy. And I got to tell you this, I've fought the law before. I don't like corporate sports media. I don't like them telling me what to say. But Dan was going down slippery slopes. I wasn't going down political slopes. He was. And I recall reading in the Miami Herald, incredible columnist, by the way, back in the day. Last summer, he wrote a piece about white power. And I'm like, what are you doing here? I mean, they're not going to keep you on at ESPN doing this. What I would get upset about in Chicago was you're not letting me criticize the White Sox and the Bulls because you're in bed with the owner. That's one thing. That's sports issues. Dan was heavily into Trump, and that's where I think they really valued him, because they remained patient for several months. And then finally, Norby Williamson said, whoa, you can't continue here.
How is your buddy Ozzie Guillen doing? You mentioned
That's what I'm talking about. How if somebody, okay, I'm gonna be clean here, even though you probably don't care. He called me an effing fag. All right, that's what he called me. If that happened today, how many nanoseconds would it take for any coach or manager to be fired? Right, 1.5.
Right.
Okay, this is 2006. Okay, it's a while back. Nonetheless, I am stunned that today you can turn on NBC Sports in Chicago and he's an analyst. And Tom Brenneman, guilty of the same slur last summer, is out of a job and probably will never get a job in a big market again, as working in Puerto Rico. Tom should be working in Puerto Rico. So should Ozzie Guillen. He should not be on the air right now. The double standards in this business blow me away. And it's because Guillen is protected in Chicago by his owner, and Brenneman obviously facing a great deal of heat, rightfully so, in a different time in America. But I wrote a piece for Barrett on why is Guillen still employed and Brenneman not employed, and they actually put out a statement at that station. No comment. That was their statement. So I haven't seen Ozzie in a while since that happened. Remember, he went to Miami and pissed off everybody with his pro Castro comments. He lit the White Sox general manager on fire on Twitter and his kids. Ozzie's out of his mind. There's your answer. But if you're listening, Ozzie, here's a little kiss for you.
Doesn't he also like really hate Nick Swisher?
Yeah, Ozzie hated everybody. When he became king of the world, after winning that World Series that I don't think ever registered in America, the White Sox won the World Series, it wasn't just me. He had a target every couple of days. He went after A-Rod, and these weren't just going after. It's like, A-Rod, stay back in your country. You shouldn't be in this country. I'm like, what are you doing? That's one of the reasons he was upset with me, because he orders a kid pitcher to being a Texas Ranger hitter. The kid pitcher doesn't do it. Ozzie goes nuts. I'm at the U.S. Open at Winged Foot. I think it was an off day or it was rain or something. And I said, I've got to write this. This guy is off his rocker. And that's when he said, where's Mariotti? The blah, blah, blah. And all hell broke loose. And at that point in time, whether it was Nick Swisher or A-Rod or me, because he had done the unthinkable in that city, winning a World Series. Remember, the Cubs hadn't won yet. So the White Sox had won the first time in decades. He had carte blanche. He could say anything he wanted about anybody, and Reinsdorf and Bud Selig were not going to care.
No doubt about it. Obviously, you got into the sports field because you were a fan. When did you decide that, or when did it come to the realization that you could pursue a career in sports journalism?
I was in high school. I grew up in Pittsburgh, big sports town. We went to games from the time I was 10 or 11. I was fortunate to grow up in that period when they were becoming a dynasty. The Pirates actually won a couple of World Series. Dan Marino was the quarterback at Pitt, and they won a national championship. Tony Dorsett. So I grew up in a sports hub, and I caught onto it real early, the excitement of it. And I also like to write. So I went to college, Ohio University, Athens, Ohio, where you've had a number of big media people attend, and decided I'm going to write sports for a living. And back then, while there wasn't blogging or anything, you just wrote your tail off. You got to the school paper and compiled as many clips as possible, and then sent them out to newspapers. And I was fortunate to get internships pretty early on throughout college, and started my career right out of college. First week, Detroit, big market, and it started a career that the column writing started when I was 25. A couple years later in Cincinnati, and I was a columnist in big, markets, major league markets, including Chicago for 17 years up until I was in my 50s. So it's not a path that I think anybody could take today, because I think it's extremely difficult. There were only at the time, a handful of, there were 50, 60, 70 good jobs in the country. Therefore, if you had them, you held on to them for a long time. Now, there are hundreds of writing jobs, but most of them are at crappy little websites that they're going to pay you pennies if they pay you anything. Right. And that's the problem with kids coming out of college. I'll get letters from people. How do I get a job? You got to somehow stand out from the pack, and standing out from the pack is doing what you guys do, making sure you can do your audio, your podcasts, making sure you can write very well, making sure you have an opinion, don't shy from opinions, because a lot of employers want you to shy from opinions and become robots. It's really difficult today. I'm pretty fortunate to have grown up in the business when I did, and have been able to be in the business during that period of time.
This is a good segue into my question because you bring up opinions, and I think you're one of, I mean, when it comes to sports media, there are very few people out there that I really truly think at this time that we live in just continue to say what's truly on their mind, what's actually on their mind, and be able to verbalize it in a way that you do. So when did it become evident when you were working in this industry? Could have been your time in Detroit, could have been your time in Chicago, could have been when you started doing TV at ESPN. When did it become evident to you that you were a different breed from most of your other colleagues? And when did the light bulb come on for you when you said to yourself, I can use this to my advantage?
Great question. I think very very early on. I mean, I'm a columnist in Cincinnati, and a year and a half later, within the same newspaper chain, I get a call from an editor in Denver at a much larger paper. We want you, come out to Denver. So all of a sudden, wow, I'm 26, 27, and they're valuing my opinions because the columnists at those papers, except Woody, he was in Denver at the time and he was quite spicy. But that's how this whole thing got started. They wanted that strongly opinionated guy. Now, what came with that was all of these crazy stories, and you realize you're going to make enemies in a hurry, and they're going to lie about you because some people in the industry just cannot keep up, or they don't want to be that opinionated, or they prefer to latch on to sports teams and people in power at teams, or owners or managers, or the star players. And see, I was always fiercely independent. I didn't care if John Elway liked me or not. I didn't care who liked me or who not. I'm writing for the person who opened the paper every day. And every time I'd say that, people go, what? Because you were supposed to be, at the time, and now more than ever, loyal to the people you write for, and also the people you work for, because chances are they have a business relationship with the people you're writing about. I'd say when I got to Denver, I started to realize, wow, there's quite a bit of inbreeding here that should not exist. The teams are in bed here. Fortunately, at the time, the National Sports Daily, which was our version of what is now The Athletic online, launched, and they recruited a lot of us. And that was Frank DeFord. That was the best sports journalists in the business recruited there. And for a year and a half until it folded, I had a chance to live that dream. Get to Chicago, and I realized this is about the smuttiest place there is, because everything you've heard about politics and corruption in Chicago, the state of Illinois, politicians, I'm finding out immediately that who are you? Where did you come from? And you can't write that about Mike Ditka. And we're going to run you out of time. What? And that's when the Reinsdorf influence came into play. He owned the Jordan Bulls and the White Sox at the time, who were actually a fairly big franchise. And he was about as big as owner as there was in America, and a big power player in Major League Baseball at the time of the labor impasse. And that's when I'm going in a roundabout way, and I will finish here. I realized you're in for the fight of your life, because these people are going to try to get you fired every day of the week, and you would better have a clean life or they're going to get you. And that's the moral of the story.
So you talk about being in Denver, and then you're at the National Sports Daily, and then you end up with the Chicago Sun-Times. You're there for 17 years. What was it like for you, being able to cover the Michael Jordan era, and did it make your job easier at some aspects to be able to know, all right, if I write about the Bulls here, it's definitely going to be well read?
It was a dream. You realize when the Bulls played a playoff game, they wrapped a wrapper around the entire newspaper that was 18 pages, meaning if the Sears Tower caught on fire, it would be on page 19, because the entire thing, they made so much money off of those. That was the heyday. Michael Jordan should have a tax for everybody who has benefited from being in his presence. That would include me and everybody in Chicago media, because at the time, Nobody was read in America more than anybody in the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune because of Michael Jordan and the Bulls dynasty. It was stepping into a dream. And at last, I stepped right into it after they had won the first championship and continued on through all the championships, all the controversies, all the madness. It wasn't just covering trophies. It was covering Reinsdorf and Krause versus Michael and Scotty and Phil Jackson. It was all of this that you saw very accurately portrayed in The Last Dance. I lived all of that. And for circulation, it was a dream, and nobody, I think, in the future of this business will ever have the eyeballs we had during that period of time.
I was surprised, but I guess because your relationship that you weren't in The Last Dance, I figured you were going to be one of the perfect people.
That's two things going on there.
Oh,
ESPN, we didn't part well, and I've been very critical of ESPN. I think they have double standards when it comes to punishing employees. I think, as I've written, Jason Barrett has me do a media piece once a week. It's called Five Who Get It, Five Who Don't. They often get it in Bristol. Often they don't get it. They don't like being criticized. They certainly don't like being criticized by me. If Michael Jordan, who I had a real good relationship with, and broke stories about Michael coming back to basketball and so on, if he had anything to do with that, he wouldn't have wanted me on there. And you know that he had the final say on content in The Last Dance. He doesn't want me on there talking about, well, geez, I wrote this about gambling and the league didn't do anything about it. I did. And that's why when I'd see him on these one-on-one sessions, he'd scream at me. And then he'd give me a 20-minute interview, which is worth the screaming. So, that's why. I mean, that was a puff piece.
Right.
It was great for ESPN at the time. They needed viewers. They got them. It was great for Michael. Unlike this recent Tiger Woods documentary on HBO, Tiger had no control over the content, so he looks kind of bad.
Armin Katayan doing a great job with the Tiger.
Yeah, because they went to Tiger and said, Tiger, you can cooperate here, but we're still controlling the content. And Tiger went, I'm not cooperating at all. And they dropped the bomb on him. Jordan held sway over that film vault. He was able to control that documentary when ESPN was begging him for years. Well, I'll release that film when I want, because Adam Silver and I have an agreement about all of that film you need for this 10-part series. So finally, he agreed to empty the vault, but with a caveat. I control the content down to the very last word. If you look at the executive producers on there, that's just two, lifelong buddies. So Michael controlled that. So there is no chance in hell he wanted me going on there talking about his gambling problems, and they were real, nor did ESPN want me on there because they hate me. So there you have it. They lost. It's not that they lost any ratings because I wasn't on, but they may have gotten more.
Did the Chicago Sun-Times send you to Michael Jordan's first minor league baseball game?
No, I was not at his first minor league baseball game. I did make a trip to Birmingham, but was not at that point. I'm trying to remember how we handled that. I think we had a baseball writer go down there. It's so long ago. I think he just, okay, we're going to just send this guy around with him. And so, but I was opposed to Michael Jordan playing baseball because I thought it was a shame that he wasted a couple of years there of his basketball prime. I understand the reasons. I think that he was grieving over his father and he needed a change, but there was a lot more going on there too. He didn't like that David Stern was, quote unquote, investigating him for gambling. There was a whole lot going on in that 2 or 3 month period. And the baseball thing to me just seemed like a waste. It was folly. If it had been for a couple of months, fine in the preseason, but he wasted an entire season. Maybe they would have won 8 championships if he doesn't go play baseball. And really looking back, what did he get out of the baseball experience? So I was against it from day one. Probably another reason nobody was really eager to send me to go watch him, because I would just ripped it.
At least we got Space Jam out of it. Not too sure how Space Jam 2 is going to be.
Well, LeBron is already planning for it to come out in movies. I hope LeBron, who I live in LA, we're the epicenter of COVID now. I hope LeBron realizes, unless he's going to put it out on VOD, Nobody's going to a movie theater after they win a championship. That's his dream. We're going to win another championship, and then we're going to put that son of a movie there. Unless there's some sort of miracle that I'm not aware of, it's not happening in July, LeBron. So plan on VOD. He copied Michael.
Yeah.
Of all the things,
Want to be like Mike.
James wants to be the greatest of all time. Why don't you create your own movie? Why are you ripping off Jordan?
How electric was the summer of 1998 for you, covering Sammy Sosa and the Cubs?
Well, we had just come off, that's the last Bulls championship with all of that drama, okay?
Right.
And then suddenly it's, okay, we can now exhale. We just covered this for 6 years. I hadn't even been to the ballpark in a while. And the next thing you know, I think it was June, I look up, Sammy Sosa's got 24 home runs or something. Sammy Sosa's 24. So I start going to the ballpark. And here's the summer of SWAT, or the summer of PEDs. And at first, I think any of us who grew up loving the joy, embracing the thrill of a home run, one of the truly great experiences in sports, whether in your own backyard doing it with your dad, or you're in a Little League game, or you're actually watching it, the home run was very valued at the time. Balls weren't juiced, but the sluggers were juiced, as we would come to know. At the time, it was thrilling because it was a story out of nowhere. And we had just finished with this historic story, and now we're getting another one. And you have Mark McGwire down I-70 doing the same thing. The Cubs-Cardinals rivalry is such a big deal. And all of a sudden, we're in the middle of this. And then here's Tiger on the side starting to rise. So just when I thought your career will never have what you had the last 6 years, I immediately was thrust into all of that. But then again, it turned out to be a scam.
So from the Chicago Sun-Times, you joined AOL. Now, me thinking back on my childhood, I could never imagine that AOL would basically go away and nobody would care about AOL anymore. But I just want to know what that process was like when they were recruiting you and how they kind of sold you on their vision, because obviously AOL not really doing too well these days.
No, and wasn't doing that well then too. Here's what happened. The Sun-Times was behind the times when it came to digital. Way back in 2003, 2004, when websites were starting to take hold, I went to the editors and said, are we going to get moving digitally? Because we're going to get killed here. One day, everybody's going to be reading this stuff on here. And why do you think this tabloid is still going to exist? We don't have the money for that. Okay. So time marches on. And now we're in 2008 and the website still sucks. And I'm realizing this paper is starting to lose circulation and we don't have any digital going for us. And they want to give me another 3-year contract, which was commonplace. I was, for them, I was a necessary evil. I think when they gave me a contract, it was like, here's sign, we don't really like you, but here's sign the contract. And because they needed me for circulation. And so that particular time, it was the summer of 2008. I said, guys, I'll sign this, but you're going to have to promise me that we up our digital process here and have a credible website, or else we're going to go down the drain. We're not going to be a big time newspaper anymore. Go to China for the Olympics with one other writer. The Tribune has 10, and they weren't even posting pieces for hours. Michael Phelps is breaking a record there and posting it. So I go home and I politely resign with a letter. Politely, guys, it's not going to work. I need digital. I need to find a digital site somewhere. Thank you for everything. Bye. I'm opting out, which I was allowed to do. That's $1 million contract. So all hell broke loose. They tried to smear me. It was just absolute ugliness. And AOL at that time came to recruit me. Now, that is when AOL was deciding with, what's his name, Armstrong, big Kim Armstrong, big hitter in digital, we're going to build up the sports site. They not only hire me, they have Kevin Blackistone, who's still around the horn, Lisa Olson, a big-time columnist. They hired all sorts of big-time writers. Many of your athletic writers now, Sam Amick, Dan Graziano at ESPN, those are our staff now. These are good writers. And at one point, I'm thinking, my God, we've got 90 writers here. At the NBA Finals, We had 7 writers.
Wow.
I'm thinking, I have hit the jackpot here. We are going to become the next great American website. Nah, it didn't happen because for whatever reason, and I think Ariana Huffington entered the equation, AOL's problems on high got the best of us at that site. And Ariana Huffington made a bid for the whole thing, and she had no interest in keeping sports around. And the next thing you know, everybody who had been hired 2 years later, goodbye. And you find out real quickly that these websites are fleeting. Sometimes still around today. They're down to about 80,000 circulation, but it's just a ghost. It's not, when we were there, it's 100,000, and we're ruling the world. The entire business, guys, has changed dramatically. Everybody knows this. This sometimes didn't die because I left. It died because it didn't have its digital stuff going on. And I tried to call them out on it, and they didn't care. I went on HBO Real Sports shortly after that, and Frank DeFord is doing the segment, and I lay it out there. If newspapers don't get with it digitally, they're going to die. As we speak today, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal are the only 3 newspapers who get it digitally. The only 3, and they are now, not by coincidence, the 3 biggest by far writing entities in America today, because early on, all 3 invested in digital, while the Chicago Tribune, a big paper at the time of the Miami Herald, or even the LA Times here, slow to the switch, and that's why they're all struggling today. AOL, nowhere to be seen. What do we have now? We have The Athletic, Bill Simmons' operation, a lot of sites that are trying but might not make it. Now you got a pandemic to worry about. It's not a good time to become a sports writer. Kids, if you want to be sports writers, I would suggest you do what these guys do and try to talk for a living and dabble in writing on the side, because honest to God, I have no idea what the writing landscape is going to look like moving forward.
Jay Mariotti, for the better part of 12 years, has tried to resuscitate the newspaper and the print industry, and the people do not want to listen to you. And Nick and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. It's 100% true. I also think when it comes to the industry, I think the figureheads at the top are still the people who don't get it. And then everybody else below them seems to suffer with this. But I also agree with you, especially what you said before. Coming out of college, I was one of those kids who, getting out of college, I'm going to be a writer. Hopefully I'll be able to maybe do another internship somewhere. Maybe I'll be able to do a part-time job somewhere and maybe work my way up. Didn't happen for me. Had to go a different course. But I want to ask you, for the people out there who are still writing, who are still finding a little more a fortunate path than Nick and Bill have in terms of the writing. So you personally, when you worked in Chicago, when you worked in Denver, when you had something, right? When you had a big story, a big scoop, the digital side of things today has made everything instantaneously. You want to get everything out there as soon as possible, but you also are trying to balance out being able to put that scoop on your website, on your company's website. Maybe you have a blog site, maybe you have a podcast, whatever the case may be. There are different mediums and more mediums now than there were when you were working 20 years ago. So what would your advice be to people who are in the industry, who are getting that news, who are getting those scoops that not a lot of other people are getting? How would you toe the line between using it as a means of promoting yourself and increasing your profile, and doing the same for whatever you have? Could be the podcast site for your company.
Well, say you guys have a big story, and I bring this up today because what just happened in baseball was broken by some guy in Canada with some crazy website name, Twitter name, and then the story, I was just reading about this today. 4 years ago, another story was broken by somebody with some Katy Perry handle that was crude and rude. And I'm thinking, of course, if you are in this business and you happen to have a connection with somebody at the Toronto Blue Jays, the PR guy's daughter, and the PR guy's daughter says, yeah, we just signed Michael Brantley. Yeah, if I'm going right on Twitter, blah, 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 Michael Brantley has signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, I don't know if that's official today, but I do know that last night I'm watching ESPN SportsCenter, and I have been getting on ESPN pretty rough in recent weeks because they're not crediting people. Somebody will break a story, and they'll at the top will say sources tell ESPN, and then you scroll down 8 graphs. The Des Moines Register originally reported this story. No, they credit them in the first paragraph. That's dirty. They're playing that ESPN Bigfoot thing. So apparently Jeff Passan, who is in the news right now, had to refer to this Toronto site, and it's got some goofy name, but
Right.
all the power to the Toronto guys. Answering your question, you got to take things into your own hands because ESPN might not credit you unless I'm sitting there on Barrett's site, pounding on ESPN for not being fair to you. So it's dirty out there. The Athletic versus ESPN. I'm glad to see Athletic is upping its game because last year they're all over the map. It's almost as if the new year started. They're getting very aggressive. They're breaking all sorts of stories, and ESPN's on its heels. And I hate it when I see the Athletic break a story. It was, I think, the Padres deal for a Blake Snell, and ESPN refers to it as the Athletic in the 7th graph. Athletic's getting to be real big time. ESPN can't do that anymore. So I'm glad you brought that up, crediting stories and how young people breaking into this business need to just take charge. The only thing I would say is don't have a goofy Katy Perry handle. Right. Have a professional handle so that if you break a big story, SportsCenter can't say Katy Perry, what? We can't go on the air with this. But if you have Toronto Sports Media King, then they'll credit you then. That's the only advice.
Yeah, if you remember with the whole Manti Te'o thing, Deadspin went and published first, so ESPN had to keep crediting them, and that was that
killed them because Deadspin. I've got my own history with them. They're dirty. They're also very dirty. They lie. They're just sitting. They've been dead spun. They're not even in business anymore. Right. And somebody bought them out and recognized what's going on there.
Hulk Hogan played a role, and then
Hulk Hogan did, and it's a shame because there's talent there, but they went for hits and they were lying and very dirty about it, including with me. But yes, they had to. And I wrote about this the other day too. Why is Vince Doria, who has spawned many big careers, Peter Gammons, Jackie McMullen, Dan Shaughnessy, anybody who came out of Boston. Vince was the big news editor at the time at ESPN, and for some reason he decided we're going to sit on this and we're going to try to get the interview. Well, it turns out, according to the documentary on Backstory they did a couple of weeks ago, ESPN killed their own former news editor by outing him and getting Vince to admit, yeah, we probably should have ran with the story. They underestimated a site out there that had this, and they wanted a double whammy. They wanted the story and the interview because Vince is thinking TV. I'm sure he had TV bosses telling him, we need that TV exclusive. They didn't get either one. You don't sit on anything, especially in 2021. If you have it, run with it. Make sure it's right, though, because so many people get stuff wrong. But if you get a story right and you're a young guy, and I know what you're getting at here, you could write the best, most creative piece imaginable. But if you have a big breaking story, that's going to get you hired somewhere more than that beautifully written prose. Go break a story. From now until the end of the world, what's going to sell a website, a newspaper, or a radio show is telling people something they don't know. And if you have a breaking story, run with it. That's how you're going to get ahead in the business, because there's no the value of inside information is gold, and now you've got these gambling sites even wanting it in dirty ways.
How did the Around the Horn opportunity come about for you?
This was early 2000s. Get a call from a guy named Jim Cohen. He was working for a guy named Mark Shapiro, who now runs Hollywood at one of the boutique agencies here. Shapiro was the one who came up with this. We need to have fun in the afternoon. We need to have debate shows. Let's have Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser do a show. That succeeded. So, like anything else, if Beverly Hills 90210 makes it, they got to have a Melrose Place, right? We need a sequel. We need another show. Well, it was Around the Horn, but there were problems from the outset. But they recruited a bunch of us. We all meet at the Carnegie Deli. we didn't really know each other. I knew Max Kellerman. He was a host. I knew Woody, and sure enough, Woody and I are there. And Bob Ryan's there, and Tim Kalishaw's there, and it's fun until the roof catches on fire at the Carnegie Deli. It was sort of an omen. We have practices, and it wasn't working out. And even though there were ads on TV, Around the Horn coming September the 28th, Shapiro shows up at a practice session and goes, "You guys aren't ready. We're going to delay this." So we were embarrassed right out of the shoot. Weren't ready to October the 4th. The show sucked right out of the shoot. Max wouldn't let anybody talk. Does that surprise you? He had this mute button. He would ask a question, then before you get, hey, blink, and then he'd answer his own question. It wasn't working. TJ Simers quit. Paige was unhappy. Everybody was like, what are we doing here? And we're getting killed by our colleagues. Everybody's ripping the show. And we whittled it down to really Woody and I and a couple of others, and Paige and I, because we had this rivalry, I think kept the thing alive. Kellerman went to Fox. That lasted a couple of months. And then Tony Reali brought, a sense of class to the show. Max was brutally arrogant. The show was choppy. It had no flow. And Tony was smart enough to let people answer questions and let people gain inside information from all of these people who do this for a living. And that's when the show settled down and started to get real big ratings. So Tony gets a lot of credit for that. And the producers of the show who settled on a young Tony Reali, who before that had become known as Stat Boy. Who's Stat Boy? Well, Tony Reali ended up being the glue to keep the damn thing alive.
Do you think Michael Holley regrets leaving Around the Horn for IMAX on Fox Sports Net?
Michael Holley's doing well. The whole thing, if you had been in on those sessions in the morning with Max right now has matured dramatically. Can you imagine him back then? There are people now who thinks Max is immature and nuts. Imagine him 15 years ago. It was, I know everything, shut up, and you're lucky to be on TV with me. Whoa, I had to do a radio show with him on ESPN nationally on weekends, and I could not get a damn word in. and Bruce Gilbert, the boss at ESPN Radio, "Jay, this isn't working." I said, "Don't talk to me. I don't get a word in. I'm not even on this show." So I'm not putting them down, Max. I think Max, it was perfect for Stephen A. Their ratings have held pretty well during the pandemic for a reason. That's a good pairing. I think better than Bayless and Stephen A. were. And I don't know if Michael Holley, I'd have to ask him, but he's doing well. He's got Michael Smith and Michael Holley have their own gig on the NBC Peacock channel. And he went to Boston and had a he still has a very good career there. Michael lasted a few minutes in Chicago as a columnist till he found out Mike North, a talk show host, was a complete bigot and a racist, and realized that there were people in Chicago who did not want this man who wasn't from Chicago, Michael Holley, writing columns in the Tribune, and he left quickly. I mean, I had that same treatment. I was not from Chicago. And if you're not from Chicago, you aren't shit. That's how they think in that city. And I didn't care. I'm still going to write here, whether you want me here or not. But Holley didn't like Chicago, and he left.
Any surprise that your former co-panelist, Adam Schefter, has become what he has become in the NFL?
No, because at that point in time, they started to bring people through the show. It was getting to the point where late in the 2000s, here's Jamel Hill, here's Michael Smith, here's Adam Schefter. I mean, wait a minute, are we sort of the farming ground here for future stars at ESPN? Yeah, we were. They'd save a chair. Adam was always sharp in the show, but I knew in Denver that he was developing a reputation as an insider. And boy, this guy, as we speak, and he's been doing it for a long time, and that's going to weigh on you. That's the kind of job where you burn out. Ian Rappaport was falling asleep on TV. Jay Glazer's missing stories left and right. Schefter's still pretty damn consistent. No, it doesn't surprise me at all. He's very committed. He's beyond obsessed. He's got the phone with him at all times.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true. I heard that ESPN had to hire him a personal driver so he could always check his phone.
I've seen that documentary on him where he's in the back of the limo. It's worth it though. You need that inside information. I'm a little skeptical of all that because remember they have a relationship, a big lucrative deal with NFL where it might be kind of understood, hey, you got to use our guy. But as I said, Glazer, where was Jay Glazer on the Urban Meyer story? Urban Meyer was working at Fox Sports
Right.
for 2 years. Jay Glazer was nowhere near that story. What happened to the insider Jay Glazer? I made sure to look at the timeline of that. He went on his own site and posted the Jaguars release. He didn't break the story. The guy's in the same studio. Maybe Fox doesn't care anymore about breaking stories. You should, because that's the best way to get your name out there. Even when you're ESPN, you want that breaking story because everybody on earth has to credit you when you do legitimately break the story, and that's free advertising.
What did you think about when Adrian Wojnarowski was suspended? Do you think that was right or not harsh enough? Because obviously they needed his information with the free agency coming up. So
I thought it showed that he was too close to the people he was covering, and I wrote that. Why are you doing that? You know, you're supposed to be covering this league, not taking up for the league politically. It crossed the line. I didn't like it. I thought maybe it's time to flip beats. Maybe he should go to the NFL and Schefter should go to the NBA. Simply because I know sports editors in this business who would do that. And where somebody's been on a beat for 12, 15 years and say, it's just time to shake this up. And the baseball writer would plead, well, I have all the sources. And the editor would say, it's getting stale, man. You're not breaking enough stories. They're using you or something. It's good to shake it up. Now, last week, ESPN was starting to get into a rut in regard to breaking stories. The Athletic was on a roll. They needed that big story last week that Woj broke. And Shams Charania was only a couple of minutes behind. I actually look at these timelines because I want to be fair. Woj broke it, the big NBA story, and Shams is right behind. So, yeah, I guess you're right. They need his sources, his inside information, but I hope he's learned a lesson that he needs to detach himself from the people he covers and not take up their cause politically against some senator in Missouri.
Yeah, we've seen Schefter actually break some NBA stories. So, and we've had Tim Kirchner on our show. He said at Sports Illustrated they decided to put him on the basketball beat after being great in baseball. So he went to ESPN. So sometimes it works.
Stale. You're writing it stale. Well, think about it. You're probably using the same phrases. I'm guilty of that. In Chicago, I started to realize, oh man, you're using that phrase again to describe the Bulls. Or it's just, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over for years, it gets stale and you need to be challenged. And if you are a supreme insider who prides himself or herself on breaking stories, you should not balk at that. You should say it's a great challenge. I would love to go to the NFL and I will drop my Woj bombs in the NFL.
Now, you mentioned Skip Bayless before. Obviously, he got a ton of money, but do you think he regrets, along with guys like Marcel Wiley and Jason Whitlock at the time, heading to Fox Sports? Because it seems like the ratings are just not matching, what they previously were on their previous shows. Coward, I think, is a bit of a different story because they kind of built the whole afternoon program around him. But just your thoughts on these guys defecting ESPN and potentially now having less views but more money as you're signaling.
That's all he cares about. They gave him a ton of money, more than he should be making. This is going to sound like sour grapes, but hey, I'm an honest guy. I don't care. Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharpe are getting, I haven't seen lately, but in general, 150, 160,000 a day on good days. I've seen that lower, sometimes a little higher. At our peak, at Around the Horn, we're up near 1 million viewers a day. And I think at the very peak of Skip and Stephen A on their show, they're only getting 350, 400. Why on earth Fox decided Skip is worth $5-6 million a year? God love them. They don't have to pay him that. They could pay him 1/3 that, and he'd go, "Yeah, where's the money?" I don't know. I don't get it. And you're gonna say, you're just jealous. No, I'm not jealous. I made a nice bit of money at Around the Horn through the years, but nothing like that. And it's because ESPN was smarter economically. They realized these sports writers have their own gigs. We can pay them good salaries to do this, but we don't have to throw these insane monster salaries at them. For whatever reason, and I think it's called CAA out here in LA, Stephen A, has a CAA attorney. When Skip Bayless, decided to jump out here, Stephen A, his guy went to ESPN and said, wait a minute, Bayless is out there getting this amount of money and he has 1/3 the ratings that Stephen A has. So you're going to pay Stephen A $9 million a year. And what's ESPN going to say? No, then Fox would hire Stephen A and then that would make a big splash. So they've got very good agents, and it's not a discipline where you can find a number of people who are very good at that. And here's why Stephen A is great at it. Stephen A will rip everybody under the sun. He draws a line. He will never touch a money guy, meaning he's not going to go after a Bob Kraft. He's not going to go after too hard a Roger Goodell. He draws the line because he knows those are the bedfellows of his network bosses. Same with Bayless. Bayless will, just be off the wall about Dak Prescott, very insensitive. You'll never see Skip Bayless go after Jerry Jones. He loves Jerry Jones. He got him the job at Fox. And there's where I'm different. I go after money guys, commissioners. I don't care. I think it's more important. My message to people is far more important than me not pissing off a boss and withholding my thoughts on Bob Kraft and what happened in Jupiter, Florida or something. I would rather talk about that and the responsibility he has. And that's why you're not seeing me anymore at ESPN. That's why you're not seeing me down the road of Fox. They're scared of somebody like me, when in reality, they should, as companies that pay billions upon billions of dollars to these leagues, they should at negotiation time say, we have editorial control. We're not going to libel you. We're not going to slander you. But if our panelist doesn't think you're a good owner and rips you tough, well, the networks won't do that. And you guys said 10, 15 minutes ago, the problem is the people on high. There's Exhibit A. Problem, people on high. And that's why those ratings for those shows aren't what they should be.
At the peak of Around the Horn, you said you had 1 million people, despite the mildly tumultuous beginnings that you got involved, you told us about. I want to know, did you always have the confidence that your persona was going to translate as well as it did to TV? Because Around the Horn at its heyday, when you had a panel of whether it was you and Paige and Tim Cowshaw, Bill Plaschke, Jack and Kevin Black,
Lil Wayne. Don't forget Lil Wayne.
And Lil Wayne. But I mean, it was so evident that when you guys were doing those shows, you were having fun. And it was organic and it was natural. And you mentioned Tony Reale, who's a Staten Island guy. Nick and I are from Staten Island. So maybe it's a Staten Island thing. Maybe we get a bad rep. Who knows? But did you always have the confidence that it was going to translate eventually as well as it ultimately did for those golden years?
No, because I thought those shows needed chemistry. For example, Kornheiser and Wilbon, they didn't just show up on a TV set. Those guys were columnists at the Washington Post arguing in the Post newsroom for years. So that chemistry of debating was already evident when they were on television. Us, I knew Bob Ryan a little. I knew Tim Cowshaw a little. I knew Woody. I didn't know a lot of those people. How in the world are you going to argue? You're more like this. And that's one of the problems we're having today. They don't have enough reps. It's just like football practice. The fewer reps you have, the more tense and stiff. But we were all comfortable because here's how a day would work. I'd fly in from some game and immediately at O'Hare be on an 8:30 conference call. And, we're talking for a fierce hour and a half about topics. And the producers are getting a whiff of what topic works and what they're not telling you, Jay, you take this side. No. This is real stuff. And sure enough, Woody would always disagree. He just wanted to. But he'd formulate a pitch. After you start doing reps with everybody, and then doing the shows with everybody for years, this stuff's commonplace. I can guess what Jackie McMullen she's gonna come after me when I say that about the Celtics. I know she's coming after me, and I'm ready for it. And I'm gonna make a face and have fun, and see now this is around the horn. Yeah, I agree with that too. It's kind of come on, where's my man Eric Ride home? Where's Aaron Solomon? Shake that up. I'm sure it's not them. I'm sure it's Bristol. Bristol controls everything. Bristol was not liking me at the end of Around the Horn because of the soccer. I'd rip soccer all the time, and Skipper was a big soccer guy. Next thing you know, I'd hear in my piece, don't go after soccer. And then when ESPN cut a deal with college football, this is before the current system, Woody and I were big opponents of all things college football. And why not? We were told that day, don't touch it. What do you mean don't touch it? Because we work at ESPN? You don't tell me not to touch it. And that's when I started losing it, because they're not going to take away my independence so they can make a few more $1 billion. I'd rather not be on their air.
Jay, do you know you're still in the top 4 all time in wins for Around the Horn, and you've been on the show in 8 years?
Yeah, well, that should tell you about my dominance. I think if you look at the win percentage, very low. I was on every day.
All right.
That's what what they put me on every day. Ask them. They set up the schedule. We had 6, 7 people every day. Mariotti. It was just like a batting order. Okay, you're putting me on every day. I show up. You're going to win sometimes.
Yeah, I think
I'm surprised you could even find that information. Is that on some database?
It's online. Woody Page, first place, 622 wins, but he can win easily now because you're not there. So there's no competition for him. Kyle Shaw's in second place. Plaschke in third. Plaschke barely has surpassed you, and he's been on the same amount of time as you.
Plaschke, who might be the best columnist in the country, just passes me now.
Yeah, it's close.
What was great about that show is, there are all sorts of elements going on there. First of all, you only had 10 to 12 seconds to make your point, and then if you went too long, bonk. But it was really fun to get to the end so you could have your 30 seconds of FaceTime. But it was sort of like going through this obstacle course. What's reality going to do to you today? Is he going to mute? And sometimes you'd have 4 points at the end, and I'm going to go. And then he knew that I was waiting to go on for the 30 seconds, and then he pushed the -5, and I wouldn't go on. He'd just play with your mind. Yeah. In the end, you realize it's just a fun show. And you brought up fun. It was fun, but it was competitive. And if the idea of that show was competitive banter, I guess I sort of define that because I love to banter competitively.
Blackistone has just tied you for 329 career wins. So he's one of the original guys too. Now, I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him. I think he kind of replaced you. But the only guy that I really watch on that show now that I could kind of get the Mariotti feel from, that's going to speak his mind, maybe it's an Italian thing, is Frank Isola. I just want to know what your thoughts are on him as a columnist.
Very classy. Frank's world's nicest guy. I'm a nice guy, but some people think I'm not because I'm very opinionated. I guess I'm emotional about my opinions. Frank is more sedate. But yeah, Frank Isola worked in the New York market forever and a tremendous basketball reporter. And I'm glad to see he's getting his due on national TV shows. Not just there, but I think he worked at NBA TV, and he does other stuff. So Frank's great.
Fills in for part of the interruption as well.
Right, a gentleman, and I'm he's the look. Everybody I brought up here, the 20 names that do an hour 30, no knock on any of them. That's just the direction that Bristol went because they realized they could use Around the Horn as a vehicle for contracts. Ramona Shelburne, who's great, we're going to have you do 25 shows a year in your contract. So they have to fulfill all these obligations in these contracts. Therefore, that's why you see somebody different on every day. It is taken away from the continuity of the show, and they've lost tons of ratings. Not just because of that. A lot of that's just cord cutting and so on, but you don't lose 2/3 of your audience. You're doing something wrong. I want that. I have a stake in that show. I want it to survive. I don't want Norby Williamson in Bristol one day say, we don't have any shows, get rid of these sports writers. That might happen, though, if those ratings drop any further.
If they came to you with a detailed apology of all the wrongs that they were committing to you while you were working there, and they said, we need to increase the scope of what we're doing again, because clearly we've lost sight of some things. We've had some people leave us. We need to reevaluate the strategy of what we're doing internally. If they were to ever come to you with a formal apology and they said to you, we'll book you 100 dates a year. We want you to be a regular on the show again. We'll find some time to you to go on SportsCenter and maybe talk to SVP, make up appearances, programming. Would you ever consider it?
Are you Kyrie Irving? You think the world is flat or something?
Ask you. Listen,
I'll
never
tell you
say
what,
never. That's what I was taught.
They would walk out. I think there's a Dunkin' Donuts 3 blocks away from. They would walk into Dunkin' Donuts, pull 4 people out of there, and put them on the set before they would ever be on there. No, that would never happen. Never, ever happen. But thanks for the question. No, it runs very deep. They jumped the gun on the only court case of my life. They never got it right. They never followed up. They never realized that we prevailed in a civil case. They never realized it was expunged starting 9 years ago. They never bothered to follow up with this Jay Mariotti guy. He's done. Well, that's sad.
Jay, would you rather?
They have protected people in that building, and they decided to make, I think, a case of me. And here's why. It's real simple. I wasn't a quote unquote employee, because I was a employee at AOL and the Chicago Sun-Times.
Contractor.
Particularly with them, I was a contractor. They could use me to make a case, whereas there's a guy right there now, Howard Bryant, who had similar issues at the time. Howard still works at ESPN. And I wrote that for Barrett, and they didn't like that. Well, tough. John Skipper made an exception for Howard Bryant, decided we don't need this guy around the horn. That's the way it works, folks. I understand if you're going to be an independent contractor, they could do things like that. But at the time, Sean Salisbury was a big football analyst there. Sean did something he shouldn't have done. It's similar to but it was one time, not like Jared Porter, which was obsessive. And they just got rid of him. They should have suspended him. Instead, they got rid of him, and I'm glad he's doing well now. But there were statements that they made in regard to discipline that were not fair across the board. And this is not the first time I've said this. I've written it. I've got other podcasts. When I had a gig in San Francisco a few years ago, I did a big piece about ESPN. So this is not something that's new. I'm just repeating it. And you asked me, would you ever go back there? In their eyes at ESPN, even though they now have Jimmy, I've never met Jimmy Pitaro. Maybe Jimmy Pitaro would be open to that. I highly doubt it, because there would be a great deal of resentment in the ranks. Because since then, as I've become this media critic, I've been very critical of ESPN. Not because I used to work there, it's because they leave themselves vulnerable to criticism quite often. But I'm also critical of The Athletic. I'm critical of Fox. I also praise ESPN quite a bit. And that's what a good media critic should do. And just because I once worked for them doesn't mean I'm going to be nice to them. Just the same, just because I didn't like how it all ended doesn't mean I'm going to be over the top critical of them. I think I'm just trying to be a fair guy to everybody in that club.
Absolutely. And last few questions here. Jay, would you rather do another radio show with Max Kellerman or work White Sox pregame with Ozzie Guillen in the studio?
I think I wouldn't get a word in either way. I don't know. I'd ask one. I'd say one thing, and Sam will answer it. No, great question. I would say Max, because Max has grown up, and I don't think Guillen ever will. I think Guillen's the same guy he was years ago. It's just him. I'm impressed by the maturity of Kellerman. Instead of cutting me off after 3 seconds, he'd let me talk 9 or 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think he's certainly more mature. But Jay, why don't you tell us about, you mentioned it throughout, but your work that you're doing with Jason Barrett now and Barrett Sports Media?
Well, it's important for me to be fiercely independent. I need to work for somebody who's not going to touch my words. And now more than ever, I think written sites And I'm not talking about sleaze sites. I'm talking about the mainstream sites. You're pretty much a puppet if you're working for them. Here's your assignment. Write it this way. We want it written this way, except for a guy like Wright Thompson, who's brilliant. But Wright's going to write these uplifting pieces. Wright isn't going after Rob Manfred. It's Wright. Wants to hang out. In a small town in the South somewhere and write about it. And that's why he's brilliant. And he's the next great, lyrical writer in America, if you ask me, not just sports. But in general, if you're an opinionated columnist, there aren't many left. They want to dictate what you're writing. So Barrett, who has been, as you guys know, has, been a longtime radio guy who has been a program director. I met with him in San Francisco and we were there a few years ago. Started the site, and it was intended as an industry site for program directors. And he has since wanted to expand it. And he came to me, he said, "You want to write a little during a pandemic?" And I say, "Yeah, but I'm going to write about sports in the pandemic. I'm not going to write about, well, this game is still going on. I'm going to hammer the leagues if they're prioritizing wealth over health. I'm going to pound them. I'm going to be watchdogging the leagues. You ready for that?" Yeah. And I did it. He didn't touch a word. Nobody else is writing this stuff because it would never run in any of the aforementioned places because they all have business relationships with the leagues. And Silver getting the horn with ESPN. What is this thing running in here ripping me? So same thing with gambling. You're supposed to be on board with the whole gambling craze. I'm not. So the beauty of writing for Barrett is he lets me write what I want. Right now the site has been down for 2 days. I'm suspecting Russian espionage here or something, or Jerry Reinsdorf or something, because it's down, guys. We can't get the site back up. Right after the other day, I wrote this blistering piece about Chicago as a sports town. So I'm wondering if some sabotage is happening here.
Let's hope not. And I also want to take you through your time because you also are the host of the Unmuted podcast. And obviously, your objective with the podcast is the same as your relationship with Barrett. You want to be able to freely speak about what you want to speak about. So I just want to talk about your time there because I think you mentioned your time at San Francisco a little bit before, but I think it took you probably a few years that breakup with ESPN and then later on AOL to really find your footing again and to try to reestablish some place where you could just be yourself and have your own voice. So if you want to just chat about Unmuted, go right ahead.
Well, I went at it hard in this business from age 20 to age 50. I worked 30 years. There were probably 90 years cumulative, given all the travel I did, all the writing I did, all the TV I did, all the radio shows I did. It was madness. Shouldn't have worked that hard, had health issues, stupid. I did not have a career coach, and I should have. So I didn't mind stepping back. And obviously AOL ends. By the way, I was heading back to work at AOL. AOL was secretly getting rid of its site. That has been, so much has been misreported about me, I just gave up. But a lot of lawyers tell me these sites are so crappy. Why have nobody takes them seriously? So don't waste your money on suing them. Or I may have sued about 10 sites actually. But I didn't mind sitting back simply because I had been going at it so hard. And also I knew the business was changing. I wanted to see how it worked digitally. I wanted to see how ESPN was going to move through a decade when there were people cutting cords. I didn't mind sitting back. John Lennon once said, "I'm just sitting here watching the wheels go round and round. I really love to watch them." I'm like, "I'm just watching all this. I didn't really care." A guy in Florida signed me up to do a so-called national radio show with a website. He didn't have any money. I went to San Francisco, realized that was a paper down in its luck, loved the city, just wanted to give it a try. They ran out of money. And then I realized I have to give this podcasting thing a shot. Well, you realize quickly in this thing, when you're not on Around the Horn for 5 years and now you're starting a podcast, it doesn't matter who you are anymore. You're lost. You're just that guy. So you have to regain all of that. And while I'm, as you said, very independent on podcasts, they have to find you. And that's what Bill Simmons has done well. He had a way of self-promotion where even though he got fired at ESPN, he turned it into a crusade, a mission, and he was able to eventually sell his newly created website, The Ringer, to Spotify. And now he's living in Malibu somewhere. So you have to have a business acumen that I was not blessed with, nor do I really care. I've made a lot of money in my career. I don't mind that. I don't need to be living in a home Malibu. I think though what I need is to be able to sleep at night. And I realized with that podcast, you could rock them, sock them, and be hard hitting on the podcast and be critical of people. If you don't have the right way of marketing it and getting it out there, it doesn't matter what you're doing on the podcast. What I also realized is you have to have guests on podcasts. I'm sure you guys have good chemistry, I can tell here. But what's gonna vote your podcast out of the middle ground and into the top levels is if you break a story again with somebody who's sitting there with you. And you do some great, if you find Mike Tyson walking around somewhere in New York and you find him and he's stoned and you put him on, you'll be at the top of the podcast list that day. Anything like that. That's how you're going to make your podcast sell. And I haven't done a lot of that because that's going against the grain of that. You know, I could try to stand in line and find Michael Jordan. I don't know what he'd say these days. I don't, you know, he said it all last spring in the 10-part documentary. So I don't know. Maybe it's just the case of I had 30 amazing years and I should be grateful for that and realize the business has gone haywire and it's changed. And I've just kind of stepped back from it. I see a lot of musicians do it. They have these long careers and then they step back and then maybe they'll put out another album. What's wrong with that? Authors do it. Movie stars do it. All I know is if I had continued on that pace for 10 more years, I would not be sitting here with you today. Honest to God, I would have dropped dead. It was too fast a pace. And I'm glad that I was able to catch my breath, gain some perspective about this business and life. And I think the work I do now, writing in it's better than ever. It's more thoughtful. I've lived longer. I understand it all. And I think I bridge this gap between 80s, 90s, aughts, and right now in the 20s. I bridge that. I saw that. I see this. I covered Michael. I covered LeBron. I'm the one guy who probably can do that comparison because I saw them both play constantly.
I think all of that is really tremendous advice. And I think the name of the game now is to be your own unique person and to be able to figure out a way to make money doing that. And that is what I'm trying to do. That is what Nick is trying to do. And that is what you successfully did for 30 years. And I think if anybody takes anything away from the last almost 90 minutes that we shared, I think that above all else should be it. Jay, thank you so much for doing this with us. We really, really appreciate it.
You guys were right. I was wrong. You were right. You were right.
Usually we give our guests the last words here to share and promote stuff, but you did a good job of speaking about that, you know, throughout the course of the episode. So what we'll do is we'll just let you ramble for the next 60 seconds. Whatever that comes to your mind, you are free to share. So long as you don't get us canceled, we're fine. But go right ahead.
All right, what am I going to say?
Thank you again for doing this with us.
All right, we'll take this time. You mentioned him earlier, Scott Van Pelt. About 3 years ago, I'm waiting for something to come on TV on SportsCenter. I'm waiting for there's a news story. Scott Van Pelt is doing something with a strobe light with his buddy on the show. I used to tweet. I don't tweet any. The only thing I tweet now are anything I write or my show. It's not worth it because you're getting the dregs of society who dribble up and want to come after you for whatever you write. It was just the way at the time. I think a lot of people, media executives, wanted their people to tweet, and I think I'm exhibit A of why maybe it doesn't work. I write, "This show sucks. Would you please get to the news?" Next day, Van Pelt, you're there, he's calling me names. I write back, "Yeah, dude, you're bald in Bristol." He writes back, "You're this." I'm like, I'm in a damn Twitter war with this idiot. So I continue, you know, maybe I'm competitive. And finally he goes low blow and I say, "Dude, you're going to get yourself sued here." He stops. He stops. And then I continue. Folks, let that be a lesson for you not to ever get in the ring with me. Something stupid like that. And that's it. I am never going down that path again. I'm still not a big fan of his because I think that's the gem job in sportscasting. And I think he's too frivolous. He's too soft. I want him to be a heavier interviewer. He gets somebody to tell softballs. You are the man now in this business. And I just think he falls a little short. Maybe I'm a guy who grew up in the business with Bob Costas. I think Costas would have been the quintessential guy for that slot. And Costas had those kinds of shows on other networks where he'd interview Paul McCartney or somebody. But I don't know. I have nothing against the guy. I just, a lot of people today, what is it with you and Van Pelt? I have no problem with Van Pelt. I just don't like what they've done with the show that they have touted as their shining star show. I'd rather see Neil Everett. If you're looking for a solution, Neil Everett to me he's got a little sharper edge than Scott, who just seems to want to be everybody's buddy. There's my 120 seconds.
All right, there you have it. And Jay, we appreciate it. Sports should be covered by commentators who are editorially and financially detached from the big mechanism, including big media, and respectful that fans are consumers who invest passion, time, money, and all that good stuff. You've never forgotten that when so many of your sports media brethren have sold out and so many sports media companies have chosen to operate on the cheap with irresponsible hires. We appreciate you for coming on. We appreciate everything you had to say. And that's going to do here for this great episode of You Know I'm Right. So for our very special guest, the one and only Jay Mariotti, and for my co-host, Joe Calabrese, I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.